The seat that should have stayed empty. The girl in the last row never blinked. Not once, not when the lights dimmed. Not even when the screen flickered to life with static instead of trailers. Daniel saw her the second he walked into Theater 6. She was sitting still, too still, as if her bones had forgotten how to shift, how to breathe. Her head was slightly tilted. Her long black hair clung to the sides of her face like wet roots, and her dress, an old faded thing, hung off her shoulders like it belonged to someone else. But that theater, it was supposed to be empty. Daniel had worked late shifts at Elmridge Cinemas for 3 years. He had seen drunk couples, screaming kids, lonely old men, but never this. Never someone who sat completely alone in the dark watching a screen that wasn't even turned on. He pulled out his flashlight, but the beam flickered as soon as it lit her row. He tapped it. Nothing, just cold air and the faintest scent of something old, like burned plastic and moldy clothes. Left in the rain, he cleared his throat. "Excuse me, we're not open for this screen." Yet no response. The girl didn't even twitch. His voice came out lower this time. "You're not supposed to be here." Still nothing. Only silence so heavy it pressed against his ears like hands. He walked down the aisle slowly, the soft thud of his shoes swallowed by the velvet carpet. With every step the air felt thicker, colder. By the time he reached her row, he realized his heart was pounding like a trapped animal. She was right there, but her body didn't move. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap, but they looked wrong. Stiff, pale, as if carved from wax. He stepped into the row, 1 foot 2, and suddenly the theater door slammed shut behind him. The sound made him jump, and when he looked back at her seat, she was gone. His breath caught. There was no time to think, no time to blink. She had vanished. But then, a whisper. "Daniel." The voice came from the front row. He turned slowly, eyes adjusting to the dark there. She was standing just below the screen facing him, but he couldn't see her face. "How did you get down there?" he asked. His voice echoed thin and cracked. She took a step forward, but it was wrong. Her feet didn't move. She slid like gravity didn't apply something in Daniel's chest, twisted a sharp, cold fear that went beyond reason, beyond logic. He backed away toward the exit, but the door wouldn't budge. It was like it had fused to the frame. He banged on it. "Help, someone's in here." But the theater was soundproof. No one would hear him. When he turned back, she was gone again, only now there was something in her seat. Something small and square. He walked toward it, heart racing, every cell in his body screaming to run, to leave, but he couldn't. Not until he saw what it was. It was an old Polaroid, faded at the edges. He picked it up with trembling fingers, held it up to the dim emergency light. It was a picture of Theater 6. The exact same room, same seat, same screen, but in the last row there was a boy. The picture was dated 10 years ago. The day his sister disappeared in this very theater. The day no one believed him when he said she never came out. He stared at the photo, then turned toward the screen, and there she was standing behind the flickering static, smiling. Daniel, realizing the theater is repeating time and memory like a trap with one way out, but at a price. The loop that shouldn't exist. Daniel could not move. The picture in his hand trembled as if the paper itself was alive. The air around him felt thicker than water, and the screen, still flickering with static, kept flashing her face like a memory caught in a storm. He turned to run, but the door behind him had vanished. Not locked, not closed, gone. Where the exit once was now stood a wall of smooth red velvet, as if the theater had swallowed the only way out. His breathing grew louder, faster, but no matter how loud it got, it was swallowed by the silence pressing down from every corner of the room. Then the screen went black. A second later it lit up again, but not with a movie. This time it was security footage, grainy and silent. It showed Theater 6 earlier tonight. Daniel entering, walking toward the last row, speaking to someone, but on the screen was alone. No girl, no whisper, just him talking to air, then turning, then panicking, then picking up the photo from an empty seat. Blinked and looked around. She had vanished again, but something was wrong with the seats now. Some of them were missing, melted down into the floor like wax. Others were torn open, with stuffing hanging like open wounds. He walked forward, eyes wide, trying not to breathe too loud, and as he passed one seat he heard it crying faint, desperate, coming from below the floorboards. "Help me, please help me." It was her voice, but not the way she spoke before. This was younger, scared, a voice he had not heard in years. Anna, his sister. He dropped to his knees and pressed his ear to the carpet. The sobbing grew louder, closer, like she was buried just beneath him, trapped under layers of forgotten time. He pounded the floor. "Anna, it's me, I'm here." But the voice only kept crying, never replying, just that same desperate loop. "Help me, please help me." He stood up, heart hammering, mind spinning. This could not be real. None of this could be real. Then the projector above whirred to life again, and a new scene played. It was him, age 14, sneaking candy into the theater with Anna. She was laughing, pulling at his jacket, her face so alive, so bright. Then the tape glitched, skipped ahead. He was sitting in the back row, alone, looking around, panicking. Anna was gone. Theater began to flicker with bursts of light and darkness, and in each burst, he saw figures in the seats. Dozens of them. Not moving, not breathing. Their faces gray, their eyes black, as if the theater had collected every soul that ever vanished between films. Backed away, bumping into a chair that had not been there a second ago, and when he turned, the girl was sitting in it, but she was not a girl anymore. Her face had stretched too long, her eyes deep pits of shadow. Her mouth opened slowly, too slowly, and instead of words a sound came out, a shriek so sharp it bent the air around him. He stumbled backward, hands over his ears, blood rushing, screaming now, but his voice was gone. Then the screen lit up again. This time words appeared. "You left here, you lead, you photoed." He shook his head. "No, I looked for her, I searched for weeks. I never stopped." But the screen showed more. It showed him days later, laughing with friends, forgetting slowly. It showed the box of Anna's things shoved into a closet, the police reports left unread, his new life built on forgetting. His knees buckled. He dropped the photo, and then everything went silent. No projector, no whisper, no crying, only the screen, now pitch black. And from the center of the room, her voice came again. "If you want to leave, take my place." The voice was no longer a child's. It was layered, echoed 1,000 versions of her speaking at once. He looked around at the melted seats, at the faces frozen in time, at the picture on the floor, slowly curling in on itself. He realized this theater was not haunted, it was hungry, and it remembered everyone who ever forgot Daniel. Being forced to confront the truth about the night Anna vanished, and the twisted choice he has to make between freedom and redemption. Night she vanished. Daniel stood in the center of Theater 6, his breath like frost in the air, his hands shaking. As the voice echoed around him, "Take my place," he wanted to scream, to run, to wake up, but the world refused to change. The walls held him, the air watched him. And the girl, or what used to be the girl, sat still in the same chair, her hollow eyes waiting for something. Daniel forced himself to move. Step by step, he made his way back toward the projector room. His only thought, find the source, break the loop, bring her back. He climbed the stairs at the back of the theater. Each step creaked like old bones, snapping in half. When he reached the small projector booth, the door was already open. Inside, dust floated like ash, and the projector was spinning on its own. No film, no reel, just a low humming sound that grew louder as he stepped closer. The walls of the booth were covered in photos, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Each one showed someone sitting in Theater 6. A child alone, a woman staring at the exit, an old man with tears in his eyes. Some were black and white, others faded, but one thing was the same in every photo. They were all in the last row. He searched the walls until he found it. The photo of him and Anna. They were sitting side by side, her hand tugging on his sleeve, his face turned toward the screen. But behind them, in the far corner of the photo, was another shape, barely visible, a blur, a shadow with a human outline, as if something had been watching. Even back. Then his stomach twisted. He remembered that night too clearly now. Anna had asked to leave halfway through the movie. Sadid. Something didn't feel right. Said she heard someone whisper her name. But he made her stay, told her to stop being dramatic, told her it was just a movie. He did not look at her again, not until the credits rolled, and by then, she was gone. He had searched Yes, but only for a few hours. By morning he had convinced himself. She ran away, lie that became truth. Because it was easier than believing what he saw. Daniel grabbed the photo off the wall, and as he did, the projector sparked a burst of light, a gust of heat, and suddenly the room changed. He was no longer in the booth. He was in Theater 6 again. But it looked new, like it did 10 years ago. Fresh carpet, clean seats, a warm glow from the hallway outside. He turned and saw himself younger, 14. Sitting with Anna, his heart dropped. He saw the scene play out like a memory come to life. Anna whispering to him, pointing at the screen, saying she saw someone watching him, brushing her off, laughing. Then she stood up, walked toward the exit, but halfway down the aisle she stopped, frozen. Daniel stared, unable to move, as a dark figure rose from the row behind her, tall, faceless, wrapped in a shimmer like heat on pavement. It reached toward her, its arm stretching too long, its fingers wrapping around her shoulder, and then she was gone. No scream, no fight, just vanished like breath on glass. The younger Daniel stood up, called her name, ran to the exit, and the screen faded. Now Daniel stood alone again. In the modern version of Theater 6, the seats melted, the air cold, the projector dead. Only one thing moved now. The figure from the memory. It was standing in front of the screen, its face still empty, but in its hand it held a key. Daniel stepped forward, his feet numb, his lungs tight. He reached for the key, but the figure pulled it back. Its other hand pointed toward the last row, and there she was, Anna, or what was left of her, pale, thin hair falling in strands, eyes hollow but wide with fear. She mouthed one word, run, but he did not run. He walked toward her, one step, then two. The figure behind him, not stopping, not interfering. When he reached her, he knelt down, took her handi, and not leaving without you. She shook her head, tears falling without sound. You left once, you don't get to choose again. Then the floor beneath them cracked, a sound like wood splitting from the inside, and from that crack came a light, not white but something else, a color he could not name, a feeling more than a color, warm, heavy, familiar. The voice returned, you cannot both leave, choose, one stays, one leaves. He looked at Anna, then at the door that had returned behind him, real, visible. Open, one choice, one truth, no going back. Daniel confronting the only way to escape this haunted loop, through a sacrifice that will either redeem or destroy him. The choice that burns. Daniel could not feel his hands, not from cold, but from fear. A fear so deep, it felt older than him, like it had waited in the walls for years for this moment. Anna stood before him, her fingers laced in his, too light, too thin, as if holding a ghost made of smoke and memory. One stays, one leaves. The voice was no longer loud. It was quiet, calm, certain, and that made it worse. He stared at the glowing crack in the floor. It pulsed like a heartbeat, a light that did not warm, a light that judged. Behind him, the exit door stood open, bright, clean. Outside this room, life still moved on. Somewhere there was a world untouched by this nightmare. But this place, this theater, was not letting them both go. Anna spoke again, her voice barely above a breath. You should go, you never stopped living. Daniel shook his head, tears welling but never falling. Not this time, no more running, no more lies. I forgot you, I buried you, I let them say you were lost. She looked away, but he touched her chin, lifted her face. I told myself you were gone, but I felt it. I felt something was wrong that night, and I ignored it. Anna pulled her hand away. You were just a kid, you were scared, but I knew, he said, and I stayed for the movie. The silence that followed was deeper than any scream. It pressed against his chest like guilt made solid. She looked back at the light. So what now? You stay here, you rot like the others. He looked toward the seats, toward the faces frozen in eternal watching, souls who had not chosen, souls who had hesitated. No, he said, I make it right. He walked to the center of the room. The crack widened. The light grew stronger. He turned to the figure near the screen, still holding the key, still waiting. Let her go. Let her live again. Take me instead. The figure tilted its head. Then the screen lit up one more time. It showed a memory. Not from the theater, but from their home. A young Anna sick in bed. Daniel sitting beside her reading stories, holding her hand through fever and tears. Then another. her crying after their parents fought in the kitchen. Daniel sneaking her headphones, trying to make her laugh then. The last one, the night at the theater, her pulling his sleeve, him brushing her off. The screen went dark. She turned to him. "I never blamed you. Not once I did," he said. The figure stepped forward. The key now in Daniel's hand, a new voice, not from the walls, but from inside him, to save her. "You must become what watches, not forever, but long enough to warn the next." Daniel felt the weight of the key. It was cold, but steady, like a promise carved from stone. He turned to Anna. "You walk through that door and do not look back. You live, you remember me. Not this version of me, but the real one." She began to cry, real tears. "Not spectral, not haunted. Humani do not want to lose you again. You won't," he said. "I will be here, watching, waiting. But this time I will not turn away." He kissed her forehead one last time, then he stepped toward the light. The floor did not open. It welcomed him, swallowed him like a returning piece of something old. Anna turned toward the exit, every part of her shaking. She looked back once, and for a moment, just a flicker, she saw him in the last row, sitting, tall, eyes calm, watching. Then the theater began to fade, seats melting into shadow, walls dissolving like smoke. The figure with no face stepping back into silence. She ran out the door, into the hallway, into the world, and the door behind her vanished. She fell to the floor, breathing hard, alive, really alive. The lights in the cinema were bright, too bright. The sounds of the outside world returning like waves, but the memory of him, of the brother who stayed, would never fade. Anna years later uncovering the dark legacy of Theater 6 and the haunting truth about what Daniel became after his sacrifice, leading to a final confrontation with what watches from the last row. The last time she looked back, 12 years later, Anna stood in front of the rusted gates of Elmridge Cinemas, now abandoned, now silent. The building was barely standing, half the roof gone, graffiti across the broken windows. But Theater 6, she knew, would still be waiting. She had spent years trying to forget therapy, medication. A new town, a new name, but no matter how far she ran, the dream always returned. She would see Daniel sitting in the last row, eyes fixed ahead, never blinking, never speaking, just watching. It was never a nightmare, not loud, not violent, just quiet. And that made it worse. Last week, she got the letter, no return address. Just one sentence written in the handwriting she remembered too well. "It is almost time to look away." She had not told anyone. No one would believe her, not after all this time, not after. The world had buried the truth in silence. Now she was back. The doors groaned as she pushed them open. Inside, the air smelled like rotten rust, but she kept walking step by step down the ruined hallway. Toward Theater 6, the door stood untouched, its surface clean, its handle cold, like it had never aged a single day. She took a deep breath, opened it. Inside, the room was exactly as it was the last time she saw it. Seats perfect, walls unbroken, the air still heavy with that old familiar dread. And Daniel, he was there, same row, same posture, watching the empty screen. Anna walked down the aisle, slowly, carefully, every memory rising like fire in her chest. She stopped at the row in front of him, but he did not move. "Daniel," she whispered. Nothing. She reached out, touched his shoulder. It was warm, human, alive. His head turned slowly, eyes meeting hers, and for the first time in 12 years, he spoke. "You came back." Tears filled her eyes. She nodded. "I never stopped thinking about you." His face held no anger, no sorrow, only tiredness, so much tiredness. "You were not supposed to," he said. She sat beside him, looked at the screen. "Why am I here?" "Because it is ending," he said. "The loop is breaking. The hunger is fading." "What hunger?" "The thing that lived here. It fed on regret, on silence, on those who looked away. And you stopped." "I became part of. I became part of." I've turned to her, fully now, his face still young, still the brother she lost. "When you walked out, I stayed behind to warn, to protect, to wait. Did it hurt? Only when I forgot who I was." She reached for his hand, held it tight. "Then let me take you home." He smiled, a small, sad smile. "You cannot take me back, but you can end it." How? Behind the screen, there is a room, a reel that never stops playing. If you burn it, the cycle ends. In you I will fade, But so will it. She stood, walked to the screen. It peeled back like old paper. Behind it, a narrow tunnel. Dark and cold, she stepped in. The walls pressed close. But she kept going. At the end, a single reel spun endlessly, projecting. Nothing, only sound, only pain. She took out the lighter from her bag, lit the flame. The reel hissed, screamed, cried. But she did not stop. She held the fire to the film. Watched it catch, watched it burn, and the theater around her shook. Walls cracked, seats vanished, voices howled. She ran back out, the screen gone. The room collapsing. Daniel still in the last row. She called to him, but he shook his head. You did it. You're free. Come with me, please. He smiled again, and then he vanished. The walls turned to dust. The air cleared. Anna found herself outside. Sunlight breaking through the clouds. No theater, no ruin, just grass and silence. She fell to her knees, crying, laughing, because for the first time in 12 years, the watching had stopped, and in her hand a photo, her and Daniel side by side, smiling. Live. The end.